Can you imagine if we had a country that decided our vote by popular election, period? We could wipe out about 47 states and save ourselves a lot of trouble and let New York and California and maybe somebody else, Illinois, elect the president. Fortunately, that's not the case, and one of the reasons why is our next guest. His name is Trent England. He's the founder and executive director of Save Our States, who defends the Electoral College and opposes the national political vote. Now, again, because you can read, I'm not going to read you his whole bio right here, but I did find out he is the father of 3. His youngest is getting ready to go to Hillsdale College. His oldest, go ahead, clap for that, so that's pretty good, right? His oldest is at the University of Oklahoma and just got a Barry Goldwater scholarship. I didn't even know there was a Barry Goldwater scholarship around, but especially being given by a university, but there is. And in the middle, his daughter is trying to pursue kind of what he's doing in the world of media and getting out there and making a difference. So he's a heck of a dad of 3, but more importantly, he's trying to save our states. He's going to tell you all about it next year and about the Electoral College. Please welcome Trent England.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all very much. Is this? And hey, Colin, good to see you. I want to talk for a few minutes about the left's agenda to change our elections. And particularly in 2 ways. One, as was just mentioned, is through something called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which many of you probably have heard of this, but if you haven't heard of this, you need to. You need to know what the left is trying to do to change the Electoral College. And the other is ranked choice voting, which has gotten a lot more press since it was put into effect in Alaska and used to make sure that the right candidates won a couple of elections in the state of Alaska. But you know, the left is smart to focus on these kind of issues, these process issues. And I think it's ironic that in a lot of ways conservatives have been caught flat-footed. Because, you know, we hearken back to the American founders, right? We hearken back to people like Washington and Madison and Jefferson, who created an incredible constitution, right? Who created this republic. And the durability of everything that they did was because they focused not just on the outcomes, but they focused on the structures, on the incentives, on the rules of the game. They understood that if you set up the right rules, you don't have to worry so much about the outcomes, right? If you have the right kind of system of checks and balances and you make sure that ambition checks ambition, then you can have a government that can survive pretty lousy people, right? And the American founders did not believe that the best solution to political problems was, well, we just got to find the right person, right? They believed it was about creating structures, right, that could survive even having the wrong people in office. Of course, the left believes that, that the test of a democratic process is that they win and we lose, right? And so they are constantly trying to tinker with our elections in ways big and small to make sure that they win and we lose. And I've been working on these things for a long time. I stumbled across the National Popular Vote Compact when I was working in Washington State, actually for at a think tank that was here. The Freedom Foundation, used to be called the Evergreen Freedom Foundation, was led at the time by a great Pennsylvanian, the late Bob Williams, who grew up out here and then moved out to Washington State and was a real champion for conservative policies out there and across the country. But Bob came back from a conference in 2007. And we were working on election security. The governor's race in Washington State in 2004 had been stolen. I think it's pretty clear based on the record that was what happened. There was an opinion poll after that election that even a lot of Democrats thought that the Democrats had stolen the election in Washington State in 2004. So we were working on election security, and Bob came back from this conference and he said, the left has this really frightening plan to effectively get rid of the Electoral College. And I said, what some of you may be saying, come on, Bob, you can't do that, right? You'd have to amend the Constitution. They're not going to get a constitutional amendment, right? That takes, that either takes action in both chambers of Congress, supermajorities, and then ratification by the states, or it takes an Article 5 convention, right? They're not going to be able to do that. And he said, no, you've got to look at what they've come up with. After Al Gore lost in 2000, there were 3 liberal law professors who came up with this plan. They said, you know, the Constitution gives a lot of power to state legislatures to decide how to choose their state's presidential electors, right? Directing their state's electoral votes. What if you could convince states to ignore how the people in their own state vote? Right? So the Pennsylvania legislature would say, we don't care how Pennsylvanians voted in this election. We're going to choose our presidential electors based on the nationwide popular vote. Right now, if one state did that, it doesn't matter very much, right? But they created what's called an interstate compact. It's just really a state law, but it's a state law that creates a contract among a group of states. And the compact says, we commit to do this if enough states join this compact that we control a majority of the electoral college votes, right? And you know the magic 270, the magic majority in the electoral college, you control that, you control the outcome, right? And even if other states are opposed to this plan, right, even if other states don't do it, doesn't matter. And they turned this into an interstate compact, launched an effort in 2006, funded by a gentleman named John Koza, who actually invented the scratch-off lottery ticket. I didn't know there was someone who invented the scratch-off lottery ticket, but this guy like won on every scratch ticket. He lives out in San Francisco. He's a big donor to Nancy Pelosi, a big donor to Bernie Sanders and folks like that. He was an Al Gore elector for California in 2000. And so he was mad about the outcome in that election, looking for a way to make sure that candidates like Al Gore never lose again. And he discovered this national popular vote proposal, put right from the get-go about $12 million behind it. Jonathan Soros, George Soros' son, put in a couple $1 million more. And they were off to the races. They got blue states to start adopting this. Hawaii and New Jersey and Maryland, eventually California and New York. And so we created Save Our States in 2009 because we recognized at that point, we just looked at the math. At that point, they were winning states at a rate that would have put the compact into effect right before the 2016 campaign. And so we launched Save Our States. We said we cannot let this happen. We have got to defend the Electoral College, both in state legislatures and also in the court of public opinion. Because one of the things I discovered, I was out in Nevada actually testifying at a hearing against the National Popular Vote Compact. And you sort of react to these things if you're like me. You're like, what are they teaching in schools, right? Why don't people understand how important these structures are in our Constitution? Well, there was a social studies teacher there to testify in that hearing on the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And he sat down, and this is what he told those legislators. He said, I'm so glad that you might take action to basically get rid of the Electoral College, because every semester I tell all my students how stupid the Electoral College is, how racist the American founders were, and how we've got to get rid of this, right? This is the problem that we have. So we work at Save Our States to stop the National Popular Vote Compact in state legislatures, but also to educate the public about all of this. And the irony of this whole issue is that the other side doesn't like the Electoral College because it works exactly as it was designed to work, right? They talk about wrong winner elections and misfire elections and all this stuff that, 2000 and 2016, these were mistakes, these were things that the founders didn't expect. And even most of the folks on the other side, at least the ones who know anything about this, understand that's not true. The Electoral College was designed explicitly to limit the power of the biggest states, limit the power of the biggest cities. We would say today, limit the power of the biggest markets. It's part of our system of checks and balances, right? You limit the power that those places have so that you balance power out across the country. That's why we have an electoral college. Frankly, it's also why India and Germany have versions of an electoral college. It's also a benefit that comes from a lot of countries' parliamentary systems. Our electoral college is unique in its specific design, but it is not unique in its intention, right? It's not unique in the effect of forcing our politics to be more national and less regional, right? And the Canadian Liberal Party did not win the most popular votes in Canada's 2 last national elections, but they won the most seats in Parliament, right? So Don't let anybody tell you that we're this weird outlier around the world or that we're not democratic, right? Most major democratic nations don't use a national popular vote for anything. But they have, excuse me, they have taken this from 2006, basically just being an idea, to today. They have 15 states that control 195 electoral votes that have passed this compact. And so we travel around educating state legislators and talking with folks like you, because the way that we stop this, the way that we defend our elections, is to make sure that people understand what's going on, and people understand that even if you've never heard of this, there are millions and millions of dollars being spent to push this agenda. And the same thing is true of ranked choice voting, right? Which is another idea to change our elections, to try to make sure that the right people win, the people the left wants, or the people, some of these major center-left donors, like John Arnold, who's a former Enron executive down in Texas, who has put millions and millions and millions of dollars behind ranked choice voting. They spent, I think they spent $4 million in Missouri on this, trying to gather signatures. Didn't get enough signatures in the last go-around, and they're back at it again, right? Because they just have that much money, right? And how does ranked choice voting work, right? I mean, this is a system that is designed to artificially create a majority by convincing people that instead of voting for one candidate, you can rank a whole bunch of candidates, but then you put all that data into a computer, and the computer runs a bunch of tabulations over and over and over again, dropping out the candidates who get fewer votes, also dropping out ballots that have mistakes, which you get a lot of ballots with mistakes when you give people a ballot that instead of voting for a candidate, it's got a big matrix on it, like, looks almost like a crossword puzzle or something, right? All these ballots get thrown out, all these ballots get adjusted, and at the end of the day, surprise, surprise, right? In some circumstances, the people the left likes win. Now, the interesting thing about this is that they're only pushing it in certain places because the left recognizes ranked choice voting helps them in certain places, doesn't necessarily help them in other places. Helps them in Maine because Maine has third parties that are to the left of the Democrats, right? And so if there are third parties to the left of the Democrats and you enact ranked choice voting, you get to use all of those third parties as a get-out-the-vote effort for the Democrats, right? And so they like it in places like that. They flipped the 2nd Congressional District in Maine because of that effect, right? They're not pushing it everywhere because there are some places where they're not sure it's going to help them. But the left, I just want to conclude with where I started, right? The left is right to focus on these kind of issues because whether you care about guns, whether you care about life, whether you care about tax policy or regulation or anything else, right? And I think a lot more of us have come to appreciate this in the last couple of years. If we can't win at the ballot box, we can't win on any of those other issues, right? If the left creates a national popular vote and shifts all of that power to our biggest cities, right, and effectively disenfranchises a lot of middle America, right, then I mean, particularly, I think, on issues like gun rights, on issues like human life, right? If all of a sudden we have the big urban political machines running the show, it'll be game over. And so we have got to make sure that our state legislators, who are the ones who face these issues most of the time, and this is true with national popular voting and ranked choice voting. Ultimately, it comes down to what your state legislators do. We have got to make sure that they're not blindsided by these issues, because I have seen great legislators, great folks who are honestly conservative, they are earnestly pro-life, and they are pro-Second Amendment. But they get co-opted by some of the sound bites of the other side. They get co-opted by national popular vote because they go out, they hire a couple of Republican lobbyists, and and they'll take folks to. They've been trying to take a group of legislators to Miami, they've taken folks to Puerto Rico, they've taken folks to Costa Rica. They take all these fancy trips and they hire a handful of Republican lobbyists. And they spin this story about how maybe this is going to help Republicans right now. And then we've got to go back, and you all can do this, right? We've got to go back and remind people, George Soros And one of Nancy Pelosi's top donors is not funding an effort to help conservatives win elections, right? I think that's pretty clear. But we have got to make sure that we encourage our legislators, our other officials to keep their eye on the ball on these kind of issues, right? And to remember that if we don't get the process right, if we lose control of our elections, right? If we lose something as fundamental as our electoral college, then we will not win on anything else. So I thank you so much for being here, and I thank the organizers of the conference for letting us be here, and thank you so much.